When I started my career in documentary filmmaking, I admired those thriving in the industry. I was right where you are, dreaming big and scared of stumbling. Years later, I went from distributing my very first documentary to filming in over 35 countries. And now, this podcast is where we share skills, stories, and lessons with filmmakers, including those who won Oscars and Emmys, to help each other grow and create impactful documentaries. Ragazzi, welcome to another episode of How We Film. Today in this episode, Joe Katches explained so many wonderful things about what does it mean to be a director of photography. More specifically, how do you choose the right lenses for a documentary? How do you work as a director of photography in a documentary? What are the creative practices, for example, that you can implement in your workflow that can help you to become a better director of photography? So all of this is going to be covered in this episode, but if you're interested more specifically in understanding how do you handle relationship, especially with directors, in order to thrive in the film business, well, Joe explained all of this in a specific video that sits on howwefilm.com. You just need to go on the exclusive content page, register. It's for free. You don't need to pay anything, and you'll be able to hear what Joe has to say based on his experience, of course. Also, if you have specific questions regarding documentary production, documentary pre-production, post-production, whatever, you name it, well, I'll try to give you an answer in a video. You just need to send me the question and I'll do my best. Really, I really want to help you out. I really want to see what I can do in order to help you. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to post the video on YouTube, Spotify, all the platforms that we use, and I'll try to help you out. I hope you are encouraged by this podcast. I hope you enjoy it, and let me know what you think in the comments. Which lens do you think I should use for this shot that I have
for
right
this
now?
shot on the interview.
Would it be wider? I mean, I cannot go much wider because there is the other. It means that I will need to paint everything black. But like, would you use that?
What happens if you go tighter?
I could go tighter. I think that I wanted to use the space because sometimes I want the people to see my hands, but I'm not sure that that's necessary. I actually thought I wanted to go tighter with this.
So you made a creative choice based off two things. One is your limitations of your set.
Yeah.
And so you chose a specific focal length because your set dictates that. The other reason is because you want a certain connection with your audience. You don't want them to see you like this the whole time.
Yeah, exactly.
You want them to see you like this because of this is how you talk and relate. And so you've developed a language just in this conversation we're creating by your 50 millimeter where you're choosing what the audience sees in your frame, what's excluded and what's in frame for the story you want to tell. And that's exactly how I pick a lens for certain projects. You could be like Deakins, though. If you watch a Roger Deakins movies, he shoots things like clockwork. He'll do his wides on like a 24, his over the shoulders on like a 24 to 32, and then he'll do his like singles on a like a 50 to 65. That's clockwork for Roger Deakins. But again, it works. It works so effectively.
Which is probably similar. I mean, it's probably over there. It's more extreme in the spaghetti western, Sergio Leone, where you go from so wide you can barely see the horse and the guy on the horse, and then you go boom. Right. Two eyes fill the frame.
Right.
I don't know that I would want to use that, especially because I work mainly on documentaries. But it can be effective sometimes. It depends on what you're. Yeah, it depends. No, I see. It's really interesting to hear you talking about this because somehow you develop a system that works for you, but then it's always interesting to hear your thoughts for in this case about like how do you do that, how do you develop that language, or is there something that you learn over time that it brings you back to the same set of lenses for the shoot?
What mood and emotion and feeling are you getting from the lens? The very first time a close-up was used, I believe it was in the movie The Great Train Robbery, or The Train Robbery. And it's about a robber trying to rob a train, and it's everything, before was just shot one angle pretty wide. And then in that moment, there's this close up, and you look at the villain's face and you get a sense of this guy is evil.
Uh,
It wouldn't have been conveyed through the wide,
mm,
but the close up tells a story. So again, there's a practical use of just film language of I want to emphasize the emotion of this scene through the close up.
yeah.
I want the audience to feel the terror of this villain through the close up, and that tight on his face is going to say it all without saying a word.
Oh,
So
without camera
again, that's
movement, without
without
anything
camera
else.
movement.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
it's just
yeah.
tightening up on that focal length and really letting the actor's face tell the story. Um, and
That's cool.
that's just film language all through cinema. It's so ingrained in us and so subconsciously ingrained in us that that when we go back and we trace it to like where did the close up come from or why did the wide angle start coming in,
That's true.
we start to see like, oh, there is a through line and it even carries through to today. Like, but
No,
it's subconsciously it just works on us
yeah,
and
no,
works.
yeah, that's exactly
Yeah,
like that's. I don't think there's a better way to describe it because I think that that's not something that you are consciously or the audience consciously think about it. You don't
yeah,
think, oh, you use
but they
the close
feel it.
up, but
Yeah,
then they
right,
feel
right.
it, and
They feel
they
it.
will never be able to explain to you. You know that close up, it really moved me because he came
Yeah,
right after. Like
yeah,
you don't go with that. And I
yeah,
think to a certain extent, though, don't you think that as artists, though? Sometimes we have to follow our gut even if we cannot explain it. I don't
yeah.
think it's necessarily conscious even for us sometimes.
No, I
Personally,
don't
I
think
think that,
so.
it just feel there's something wrong with it and the other one feels right.
Yep.
And if you know, of course, what you're doing, you have a specific vision and you know where the story is going with and what kind of, how this brick is going to be part of a big
Right.
wall where there are many other
Right.
bricks, then this, I think, has to go this way. Um, yeah, I think
Y-
sometimes, I don't know, like, do you trust your gut like that?
Yeah,
Or because the
I
problem,
shot.
sorry, the problem is that you also have to explain this, like, you work with other people and you will need
Right.
to somehow be able to explain. You cannot just go to your director and say, this feels wrong. Like, you will want to
Yeah.
know a little bit more than that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He'll want an explanation. Why does it feel wrong? We were shooting. I was shooting a film, and it involved a birth scene. And the director's like, "I want this locked off, just straight on."
uh
And I did that. I put it on like a 50 millimeter. It was a flashback as well, and I'm like, this just does not match the intensity of this scene. And so I just asked the director, I said, hey, two things here. One, this is a flashback. Two, it's very intense. And we're sitting here on a long lens, uh, on a tripod, and something's just not conveying that emotion to me. So I said, can we try this? Can we try popping on an 18 millimeter?
uh
And can we go handheld and get right up in the action? And he said, sure, just show me what it looks like. So we did that, and the reason I told him the 18 millimeter I think would work is because it's a flashback, and I feel like it could give us that surreal kind of like
mm.
feeling of like I'm reliving a moment I've already been through. So we did that. We popped on the 18 millimeter. I just got the camera hovering right in, and he's like, this is what it needed. This is it. This tells the scene. This is exactly what it needed.
That's cool.
Um,
Even because when you think usually about dreams, it always, I don't know about you, but to me, it feels like you always have the view that is much more amplified.
yeah,
You probably have more
everything's
than
amplified.
180. Everything is like, very much like you can almost see all around you.
All around you, yeah, exactly. Even when you think back to a memory that just happened, you can almost feel like you're in the third person, like everything is amplified, it's wider, it's bigger. Which is why I told him, I was like, let's just try it out and see what feeling it gives us. And
Hmm.
so that movie had several flashbacks. We shot them all 18 millimeter. We shot them all handheld, and it just worked for that film. It,
You
it
made the
it was a
decision
language. Yeah, we
uh,
made the decision on set.
on
Yeah,
set.
yeah. Because initially he had this idea of shoot everything lock off with like kind of a almost like a Vaseline effect on the lens, so it's a bit
Uh,
hazy. But I just said, on the day, like, let's just try this and see. And for our first flashback, we did it, and then we ended up doing it for all the flashbacks. But we developed that language
Uh,
that maybe an 18 millimeter for another movie doesn't
yeah, it wouldn't
convey that.
work. Gotcha.
But for this movie, it does, because it's the language of the film we developed, and it gave
Beautiful.
us that feeling. Yeah,
That makes
yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. That's cool.
yeah.
That's really
So
helpful. And now this is a very dumb question, but like, do you have a lens that you always see yourself going back to? Like
boy,
it's like
I
that lens, I really, really like it.
that's not a dumb question. I think almost every DP could say they have, like, this is my bread and butter
Oh yeah?
lens. I think anywhere in the 28 to 35 millimeter, I could
Uh,
I could live on that. I could live in that range and shoot a whole movie on that easy.
even
20, 28 to 35 mil, easy.
now you work in fiction and documentary. Now, would you do the same in documentary? Like for an interview, for
Documentary,
example?
documentary. I love zoom lenses for documentary. I like to make my life easy in documentary, as easy as possible.
Ah,
Um, I shoot a lot of my interviews on a 35 millimeter for the wide, and then usually like a 70 to 80, 85 for the B camera.
love
So
it.
yeah.
I feel the
Yeah.
same. Because 24
Hey,
feels
coming
too
from a
wide.
full-time doc guy, that makes me happy you're celebrating. So
No, no, no. I love it because usually the, I don't know, 80/24, like, man, you better have a really good location for it. And
that's the thing. Yep.
like you gotta really have something that is like, man, the interview has to show this huge paintings in the back, right? Or something, or a huge old library, and you want to show
Something.
it. Ah,
Something. Yeah, I
so
agree. Like, if you have the location and you have the lighting to go with it,
that is true.
um, go big, But if you don't have those things, like, don't
It's
don't
not gonna look good. You
don't
in an
overdo
apartment,
it, man.
in an apartment you put an 18. Oh man, I mean it
Especially
depends. Like,
especially on low budget
yeah,
documentary work. Like, you just don't. I mean, a lot of times it's a crew of like three of you out there, three or four of you out there, if that. It's just a small crew trying to make this thing happen. So you don't have time to be like, give
yeah.
me four M18s out the window here. Like, no, there is none of that. There's no grip truck. Like,
But Joe,
so.
tell me one thing. How is it for you to the switch from fiction to documentary? Like, do you have to change your mindset when you go on set, or how you prepare for it?
So, in a lot of ways, yes, because the fiction side, so much of it is done in pre-production in terms of
Uh,
like,
that's
being
something
able to
that's
plan.
something I really want to talk about it. Like, cause it's
Yeah.
really interesting for me. Go ahead, go ahead.
No, no, I mean, I'd be interested to hear your side of it too, because I do shoot much more fiction than I do documentary. I do
Okay.
some documentary, but a lot more fiction. But the ability to just plan and prep and
Uh,
storyboard shots, to have shot lists. I mean, you can have shot lists in documentary, but it doesn't always. I feel like I toss the shot list a lot more in documentary and just like kind of go with what feels right in the moment.
yeah.
Um, a lot of times too, documentary could just be so straightforward and practical. Was it in focus, and
Mm,
did we actually get the shot? Because there's so much we're trying to capture something live as it's happening, and we're trying to stage less in documentary
yeah.
and have it be more free flowing and natural. I think that's what you're aiming for in documentary, is how can I get this less staged and more natural. Whereas with fiction film, it's like, hey,
Yeah.
we have a very tight narrative, and we have a storyboard, and we're sticking to that. With maybe we'll insert like 2 to 3 shots or change something on the day, but
But
um,
how does the conversation, for example, change with the director when you're doing a documentary?
well, again, I don't think that the conversation changes for me in terms of documentary, in terms of like, what is the theme here? What is the concept?
Ah,
I think that's always like, for example, I just shot a homeless documentary, um, and the director wanted to convey the idea of like, a person's right to have a home, a person's right to exist is what I think the title of it was. And so we wanted to show basically the beauty of human nature,
Uh,
whatever your circumstances. And so our big reference was Nomadland. We looked at Nomadland and we said,
okay.
hey, this movie was shot in a way that brought a personality to these nomadic people who don't have a home and they go from place to place. And
Hmm.
a lot of times I think Nomadland, the visual is just the face. That's all it is. It's just a face like crammed in a frame on like a 30 millimeter lens.
Uh, uh.
And that's what we did. We just said we're gonna like get the 30 mil close and just show people's faces here. Show human nature through the
Which means
face.
with the 30 mil, it means you have to go kind of close to their face.
Oh
Like
yeah, yeah.
they can
And
feel the camera.
there were times at rallies where I was just standing in the middle of the crowd or in front on the stage, just right with the camera in the person's face. But that was a choice we made up front to shoot it that way. Now, did we get everything on the 30 mil? No, we did
Uh,
a lot of 180 millimeter
mm,
because there were points we had to be far out of the action.
okay.
There was a one more example though. There was a documentary I watched done by Errol Morris.
Hmm.
Um, Gosh, I can't remember the name of it. I'm sorry, it's slipping my mind right now. It's on
No, don't
Apple
worry.
TV, but it was this idea. It was about a guy who was like a spy, and he had these different personalities he would portray.
Ah.
And the way the director and DP carried it out is they shot all the interviews with pieces of glass from mirrors. And so they would shoot the lens into a mirror and it would reflect, it would have a reflection here. And it's like, which one is the actual guy in the frame or what's a reflection and what's actually him?
Oh, that's
But that
interesting.
psychologically working on you as the audience is so well thought out, man. It's just brilliant. Like that's
I
a
have I have to say I tried to do that in Madagascar as I was filming a story of a guy that discovered that he was adopted. And that messed up big
oh
time
yeah,
with his
yeah,
identity.
yeah.
But I was alone. And you know, I had
That's
a local
challenging.
producer, so I was trying to do my best. Like
That's so
it was
hard,
not for the
man.
interview, it was like just for simple b-roll, but it didn't work as I thought it would be. I thought the idea was cool. I didn't watch the documentary. I thought the idea was
That
cool to play with the mirrors changing, you know, and moving around with your
that's a
face,
great
especially
idea.
if you have different sizes. Like you
Yeah,
see
yeah.
different, right? I
Yep.
thought that you will see your identity split into different parts, but you are in the
That's a
house.
brilliant idea. That's such a great idea, Joe. Let
So
me
anyway,
I'll look up that documentary cuz I it's going to bug me if I don't.
yeah, go for it.
Let's see. It was by Errol Morris and it's called The Pigeon Tunnel is the name of it. Came out in 2023, The Pigeon Tunnel.
I don't think I've seen
So,
it. It's
yeah,
on
it's
Apple
on.
TV?
I believe it's on Apple TV. Yeah, yeah. Just check it out. Let me know what you think. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
I'll check that out. Because
Yeah,
tomorrow I have a
yeah.
long flight. I might download it
Oh, perfect.
and
Download
watch
it and
it.
watch it. That and
Okay.
Hidden Life.
Okay. And no, there were a few other things I wanted to ask you, like, you know, but going back on the documentary production, I think I'm interested on location.
Yeah,
Like for me, I try to do my best to find the location ahead of time, know, get a better idea of how big is this room, so that I know
right,
exactly where I'm gonna put the light, and trying to understand well how long it's gonna be. Am I gonna have the
right,
background blurred? Can I do that? Where does the light come
right.
from? Like, you know, the sunlight coming in is gonna bother, you know, or will cooperate with me. Like,
Yeah.
how do you work with that? Like usually they tell you this is the location we're gonna shoot. How do you prep for a doc? Like, do you have a lot of time to do that?
Sometimes there's the ability to scout and say we have three locations. Which one's best for the story? This one's the best because X, Y, and Z. And other times you show up on the day and the person you were going to meet, hey, I can't get down that way. We got to switch location on the day. And
Exactly. That's what I'm interested
so
in understanding. Like, you do your best, right?
you do your best, and you also just say, like, I think a number of factors come in. What does the location give me naturally? I walk in there
Mm,
right away without turning on a single light of my own, and say, what naturally can I
mm.
shoot here without turning on a single light? I just did that for an interview the other day on a documentary. I walked into the location. We were already short on time because our other interview went way long. And so we walked in, we said, we have 30 minutes to shoot this interview, and we have 20 minutes to set it up. So I just
Ah,
said, let's put the subject right by these two glass doors. The sun had moved over the building, so it was a nice soft light. I
okay.
said, that's going to be their key light. And then I'm just going to build a quick edge light on them to separate them a little bit from this background. And then we'll give this depth right here. And we got our shot. Like, boom.
Mm,
Um, the other time on that same documentary, I had to go to someone's apartment and shoot their interview in their apartment. There was no room. There was nothing in there. The light was dim. There was no room. And so basically, what I did was I always have like a tube light on me or two, and just create a little book light or bounce that tube into a little styrofoam cutout that I've
mm,
made. Uh, a little bounce on them and soften up the light. But yeah, you don't always get control over that.
yeah.
But what I do think helps being consistent on is this.
Ah,
What is my interview framing for
yeah.
every subject? Are they straight on? Are
Mm,
they off right? Are they off
mm,
left? Is it a mix of the three? Where's
mm,
their eye line at on the thirds? Like, those are the things I want to keep consistent on the interviews, regardless of the backdrop, regardless of the lighting. I want the
mm.
framing and the composition to be consistent. I think if you can do that much, regardless of location and lighting, you're going to make a lot of headway. So,
And which usually what do you prefer better? Like what you like the most? When they look just slightly off the lens, or when you like more when they're just like, I'm looking right there right
way
now
off the
and you're
side.
totally,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've always preferred just slightly off the lens. I
Okay.
feel like it's not, to the lens feels very personal, almost like
Yeah.
a pleading or a direct, like
Yeah.
presidential
Yeah, yeah,
direct
yeah.
pleading. But just slightly off the lens feels personal enough to me, like you're in the conversation, not
But
so far out of the conversation. Um, and it's interesting how different documentaries are shot. I just watched what was it? I'm drawing blanks on all these
no, don't worry.
documentaries today. It was some Netflix documentary, and they had the framing all over the place. Some people were in the middle, some were far right, some were far left. But every one of their interviews was shot with a background of windows that had ND on them and enough exposure to see the trees outside for every interview.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, they kept the
Oh,
composition
I
and
see.
that much of the lighting the same for all the interviews.
Oh, it's
Um,
interesting because I never been bold enough, I think. Yeah, probably. Sometimes I see the frame where the face is in the corner
yeah,
and the angle of the camera, like, let's say this is the head, the camera is like pointing like this, and the face
right.
is right down in the corner, and the rest is just empty space.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know if I never been bold enough to do that, or maybe I
Yeah,
never really felt like that was helping to really go. Like, it almost feels to me
yeah,
sometimes that if I'm gonna try to pull that off, it's like, what does that do to the interview? Is that really helpful?
right,
But then when I
right.
watch it on some, when somebody else does it, I'm like, well, to me it's actually kind of nice. It doesn't have to be
Yeah,
always like, just straight, simple, easy to follow. Like, he can be creative like
right.
that. It doesn't bother me. Yet I never pull that off. I don't know.
It's interesting. If a lot of times, if I can't control the light, or the lighting's just not, it's just not in a place where I'm like, the lighting's doing a lot of the lifting here. I do like to think through, how can I compose this in a way that looks interesting? How can the composition be visually interesting as opposed to letting the lighting? And it's things like that where it's like, we're going to put our subject on the lower thirds,
Ah,
and have all this negative space around them. We're just going to get them really low on the lower thirds. But
I
yeah,
think
you're right. It can establish something visually and
yeah,
carry
probably.
a statement.
I think I'm a little bit of afraid that is gonna go a little bit,
Sure.
over. So maybe I've been playing too safe. I wanted to play safe too
Yeah.
much, I think.
Yeah.
Now that I'm
Well,
thinking
do
about
it.
it,
Do it. Take the risk on a project that doesn't have a producer standing over your shoulder saying it needs to be this way.
I know.
Take it. Take it. Go shoot a 2 minute mini doc and play with the framing
Yeah,
that way.
probably. That's probably, yeah, that's
That's
probably
that's a
that's
good that's a great time to experiment. I try to shoot creative projects every 3 months where no producers involved, just me and the
ah,
camera, and that's where I play with stuff like that. And then a producer might see that and say, "I want to," like
I want
they
exactly
saw.
like that. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's
I
true.
had a
That
director see a short I shot. It was just a creative short, no budget, just two
ah
minute short, and they said that framing you had in that shot, I want that for this project. Like, and,
ah.
and it was a very off frame, like a lot of depth, and the subject was way off frame, and they're like that's what we need. We need that style for this whole project.
Um. So man, that has been really interesting. Like, oh, I had one question as you were talking about, you arrive, you have 30 minutes, and you got to work with what you have. That's
Right,
that's that's it.
right,
I wanted to ask, like, when you have to travel overseas
yeah,
or a different state, you cannot rent equipment. What do you usually bring with you? Because imagine you have to bring everything with you. Oh, that never happens.
right, right. Well, this goes back to your question on the difference between film fiction and
Documentary.
documentary.
Hmm.
Um, when I shoot documentary, I am almost always saying, like, how can I always get the shot with natural light?
Ah,
How can I build the natural light for B-roll stuff? For interview, I always have like a small lighting kit. But for B-roll of documentary, it's always what can I do to utilize the natural light?
no,
And
I meant
sometimes
for
for
for the interview. I meant for the interview.
yeah,
Sorry.
for the interview, I mean, they make such portable lighting now that it's
Yeah.
really it's really easy to pack something. Like, you can bring a 5-in-1 reflector that
Mm.
also has a silk in there with a kit of like 3 tube lights, and you're good. Nanlite makes these little 60B lights that are like super travel ready.
Yeah, it's true.
You can pack 6 of
Like
those in a
6 of the. Yeah,
backpack.
it's true.
I mean, and those put out a decent amount of light. So you can have some light ready. But again, with documentary, I'm always, almost always emphasizing what I can do with the natural light. Sometimes it's just me and a reflector. That's it.
Mm.
Like, it's me and I have a grip who's got a reflector, and that's all it is. Um,
No,
when Roger Deakins shot No Country for Old Men, all these DPs today on YouTube and a lot of stuff, they're always trying to soften the light, make everything soft, make every angle soft, make everything as beautiful and as soft as possible. You watch a movie like No Country for Old
I
Men, Roger
know.
Deakins is out in
I
the desert
know.
with no diffusion, no negative fill, and it looks fantastic.
No, it's
Why?
true.
Because he knows how to work the light regardless of diffusion, regardless of um, but you look at all his philosophy as a DP is the lighting is always consistent, always. So if it's
Mm.
backlighting this character, then it needs to be front lighting this character, and that does not change. So again, it's like, what is your philosophy as a DP? Are you one of those guys like Malik who's just like, I'm going to just use natural light and use like some neg and some diffusion a little bit here and there, some bounce? But like when him and Chivo shot Tree of Life, they're just running around with a ton of natural light and a little bit of neg fill.
Yeah.
That's it. Like,
No, I
you
think
know,
no, personally, especially when I'm filming in places where it goes back, I think, to let's say, I don't know how to explain this concept. Like when you go back to uh the beginning of like rural places, like the beginning of humanity, I imagine like that, right, where
Right,
the
right,
technology is almost non-existent. When I go in places like
right.
that, somehow I feel like it just doesn't call for artificial light. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. Like
Yeah,
whatever how bad the light is, I'm gonna try to work with that and
yeah,
not gonna put any light. And man,
right.
it always pays off like so well.
Oh
Like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's it's like unbelievable. Like how much I'm more happy with that than
yeah,
then
yeah,
putting all those lights, in this beautiful
yeah,
location, like and doing all of that. I still prefer that. In
yeah,
places like China and Africa.
yeah.
Oh man, like you go like in a certain, remote areas in villages where man, like you don't even want a light.
Incredible.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Africa especially, they have those small window where the light comes in very, in a specific
Right,
spot.
right, right,
You know what I'm
right,
saying?
right. Yeah.
So anyway, so all
No,
that
that
to
makes
say,
that makes total sense. I think it was Conrad Hall who said, and Conrad Hall is like he's one of the greatest DPs of all time when it comes to fiction work. And he said like the longer I was in my career, the less lights I wanted to
that's
use.
true.
Like I wanted to go from 10 lights to 5 lights to one light, like to single source lighting. And I think the more you just play into what a space can naturally give you and
No, it's true.
supplement that a little bit here and there, like yeah, you get a great image, especially with today's digital sensors. I mean, those you can throw a lot at those sensors.
So for someone that is just starting out, what do you
Yeah,
think are the essential skills that a DP should focus on mastering? Somebody's
yeah,
just starting or they really want to get good at being a good director of photography. What they should focus on?
yeah. There's a handful of things I would say.
Hmm.
Number one, I would say is be a learner. You want to learn. You want to have a mentor, or even if you don't have an in-person mentor, you want to have somebody or a handful of people whose work you can follow and learn from.
Huh.
Maybe Roger Deakins is one of them. Maybe Chivo is one of them. You just want to have
Hmm.
folks that you're constantly getting input from to learn. And you might not be on set with them, but there's such a body of work available today on YouTube and a variety of
That's
classes available
that's
where you
true.
have access to these incredibly knowledgeable people. So be a learner. Don't come with all the answers. Something about our generation says, I've learned something for a year and now I'm the teacher. No, no, no. We are learners and we're constant learners, and you need to continually sit under the teaching of these people that grow and know. I would say some important things starting out as a DP: really study light, study the way sunlight is, study the way a room ambient light is, look at how the sun reflects off different subjects,
Hmm.
look at how lighting looks on a certain individual. How's backlight look on an individual? How's hard
Hmm.
light look on an individual? Just study lighting. Look at lighting. Um, Pick up a camera and try to shoot a 2-minute project with one light, with like a bare light bulb. Throw tests your way so that you're learning lighting, even if it's just a Home Depot bulb that you bought.
Yeah.
And shoot a whole project with just one bulb. Learn camera. Learn how to expose a camera. Um, learn how to use T stops and F stops
Hmm.
to achieve different looks with a camera. Learn how your camera's dynamic range behaves. So learn how to move your camera, learn when to move your camera, learn when to go handheld, learn when to push in, when to pull out, when to truck the camera, learn these movements. Learn composition. That's a huge one. Learn how to compose a shot, learn how to shoot dialogue. You don't always need a wide, two overs, and two singles. That's called shooting coverage. Shoot for the story. Shoot
Hmm.
for know when you need those kinds of Know when you need a wide, or know when you just need a wide that's an over the shoulder and then it's two singles. Like, learn composition and how to do that. And then the last thing I'd say is really pour into studying. Even if you're a DP, learn screenwriting, learn directing. Like, grab a bunch of screenwriting books and learn those, because that's going to teach you story beats. That's going to teach you character. That's going to
Mm.
teach you and inform you when you're reading a script to know, like, oh, this is a very emphatic moment. The character's making an extremely important decision, and we're going to need a push in right there to emphasize that. Like, so learn screenwriting and learn character and those kinds of things. Study those. But yeah, that's just I mean, I'm
Oh, that's
rambling here.
cool.
That's a handful
No,
handful
no,
of
no.
things to study. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Joe, I could go on for hours. Like
Yeah. Same
I
here,
always
bro.
feel
It's
like every guest that I have on the podcast, I wish now we would go for dinner together. And
yeah.
like for you will be
yes.
lunch maybe,
Yeah,
but
it'd be
then we can
lunch.
keep the
Yeah, yeah,
conversation going.
yeah. Awesome.
Joe, seriously, thank you so much for being part of this. And
Yeah,
even to
thank
share
you for having me on this. It's
no,
great.
even to share everything, like I really like the part that you talked about lenses and all of that. I think it's gonna help me in facing, or at least to make a more conscious decision
Yeah.
over what I choose and why I choose that
Yeah.
lens.
Yeah,
That
right.
makes
Have
sense?
the reason behind it. Makes total sense. No,
Yeah, even
that makes complete sense to me.
and is also confirming certain things or is making me think about, I would like to explore more, how I do
Yeah.
interview, for example. I have one next
Yeah.
week. So
Yeah.
it's really, really, really good. Uh yeah, man, let's stay in touch and
Yeah.
thank you so much for being part of
Please.
this.
Please. Yeah, thank you, Joe. Thanks for making this happen, and appreciate, even with the filming of all this, your patience in that. But
No, no,
it's
no,
really
no,
great
not
you
at
do
all.
this, and you're educating people, and I learn a ton from interviews like this kind of thing. So it's great you're putting the work in to pass on knowledge from different people to others.
Ragazzi belli, this is the end of another episode. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Joe. Let me remind you that there is a specific video where Joe explained on how do you handle relationship, especially with directors, in order to thrive in the film business. And so if you're interested in that, you just need to go on howwefilm.com, have access to the exclusive content page, register, it's for free, you don't need to pay anything, and you're going to be able to watch that video. Also, if you have any specific questions regarding documentary production, well, at the bottom of the homepage of howwefilm.com, you can submit any questions. I'll record a video with the answer. I'll do my best to give you the answer. I don't know everything about documentary filmmaking, but I'll try to leverage my experience in order to help you out. I really care about that. I really care about you. I really care about helping you. So yeah, go ahead. Send me a question. Even if you think it's a dumb question, there's no dumb question, especially if you're starting. So go ahead. Send me your questions. I'll create a video and I'll post it on YouTube and all the other platforms where we have the podcast. Love you.